This is Steve Sabudowski, publisher at BayouBuzz.com, and today we're going to be doing something totally different than I've done before, and that is to have a conversation about an issue with a person, an expert, who is not on video with me. He is actually calling in by phone, Mark Kende. He's a director of Constitutional Law Center, James Madison Chair in Constitutional Law, Professor of Law, and expertise, constitutional law, comparative constitution, civil rights, cyber law, and civil procedure. So, Dr. Kende, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to be talking about the really, I guess, controversial issue, obviously dealing with the Trump conflict of interest. So
thanks for having me.
So if you could fill us in, I'm assuming that you did see the press conference yesterday, and if so, tell us, if you don't mind, what are your thoughts?
Well, President-elect Trump is setting up a kind of trust in which he's going to have his two sons, as you know, probably apparently run his business operations. He's also going to have an ethics advisor, apparently, who he will appoint, who will also assess transactions that his sons engage in. And the bottom line is that's a good start, but it leaves a variety of problems and doesn't fit what is considered to be the best way of doing things, which would be a fully blind trust independent of his family, or more extreme, selling his assets. But certainly a fully blind trust independent of his family would have been feasible and would be a better way of doing things, and would certainly help diminish the conflict of interest appearance.
Okay, so the different elements of the I guess agreement and those things, is it a blind trust? Because it's not blind, right? I mean, he doesn't have total access, and he has very limited access, and he just gets information that is, profit and loss. Am I correct? I mean, just
yeah, it's not totally blind in that he will, I believe he may be given information regarding some of the results of how the funds or businesses are going. In that sense, it's not totally blind, but the traditional blind trust in this context has still had that aspect to it, but the people running it have not been such close relatives and political advisors to the president or to the official involved.
Okay, so as I appreciate it, I've done quite a lot of reading about this both before and after yesterday's press conference, in terms of the information flow or lack of flow. It's blind faith on our part. Is that correct? I mean, we have no control over whether or not they're actually having a conversation direct or communication some other way, or, for example, his daughter and son-in-law are going to be in his administration. They're not prohibited, am I correct, from communicating with the sons about the business?
That's correct, and in that sense, it's really not a blind trust. They could draft some language. They could add something about the daughter and son-in-law if they wanted to, but everything looks more problematic given the close relationship that exists within the family, particularly it seems with regard to political decision making. I mean, they refer to themselves as a team, I think, or at least used words like that frequently. So yeah, it's not really a fully blind trust, and it's possible that people close to the president could get information, such as his daughter, and it's possible, the president could, although if we believe the president-elect, he says he's not going to have any decision-making capability with regard to what goes on.
Okay, so as I also understand, there's going to be, say, two ethics advisors or guardians, one in the administration and one also in his company. Who
That's correct.
Yeah, but who chooses those people? I mean, obviously the implication is that if you choose somebody, you can fire them. That means you control them.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, one of the most troubling aspects of this, besides the failure to distance himself in terms of who's running the blind trust. He's picking the ethics advisors. You know, we went through a scandal, and I'm not saying this is the same thing at all. I want to make that clear. But when we went through the Watergate scandal, it was thought that we needed afterwards to have an independent counsel ethics advisor, and certainly the person who might be investigated was not in charge of picking who that person would be. And so that's, I think, one of the more troubling aspects of this that doesn't make sense and that does not remove the conflict by any means at all.
So now there is the argument that he doesn't have a conflict of interest by law. That the law from what 1987, I think it was, does not apply to the vice president and to the president. And he says, "Hey, look, yeah, I didn't know about this, but it's a nice thing to have."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's
I
the
mean,
deal? Yeah.
he makes that argument, and it's technically correct that some of these federal laws do not apply. But I guess I'd respond in two ways. One, first, you want your president to give the nation the confidence that the first thing on his mind is the national interest and not his personal or financial interest or business. And this does not suffice, I think, to provide us with that confidence. And secondly, there is a clause in the Constitution called the emoluments clause that some very good scholars have said is not sufficiently taken care of here, which prevents essentially the officials from taking gifts from foreign governments. It's debatable as to whether it applies to the president, but I think the much better view is that, of course, it applies to the president because he would be the person you would be most concerned about being influenced at all by a foreign government. And the setup of the company is such that there's still a lot of transactions that are going to occur with foreign entities. And, so there is a constitutional provision that probably governs this, and that therefore to say there's no law that sort of restricts him would be going too far given that constitutional provision, in my view.
So as I appreciate it, he's not going to do any new deals. He's not going to do the $2 billion deal that apparently somebody offered him last week, and he's not going to do any new foreign deals. But he still has his hotels, and he still has his buildings, and he still has his some of his existing but not completed deals. Am I correct about that?
Well, yeah, that's correct, and that's a bit. It's something to be careful when we say that. So he has foreign properties, and that means foreign government officials and foreign leaders, and he has domestic businesses as well. In those existing arrangements, can still do things like stay at his hotel, presumably. He's not, from what I understand, banning them from staying at his hotel or perhaps even working with American corporations and then having the American corporation make the deal, and then later on it comes out that there was some connection between the foreign company and the American corporation that made a deal with him and his business while he was supposedly not aware of it, but it still could occur. So, he's taken a few steps, no question, but he has done by no means enough, I think, to insulate the appearance of the conflict of interest still existing.
Okay, and what is the real issue here, if I might, and that is in terms of the foreign governments and the emolument clause, as I appreciate it at least, you're talking about the king or prince or a foreign government official, but what about a foreign business And in some countries, and I don't know exactly those countries where he owns his properties, but the government has a large role in the ownership in some governments. And
Well,
so I'm just, yeah, go on.
yeah, I was going to say exactly that, that it's clearly something that prohibits, in my view, anything in terms of gifts or certain kinds of compensation from foreign governments. But the other aspect is in many of these foreign countries, the major corporations are intimately linked to the government and do what the government says. And that's what I mean by arguing that this doesn't remove the conflict of interest in a similar way that a foreign corporation connected to a foreign government could work with an American company to make a deal with the Trump folks unless they've got some fine print that excludes that kind of deal making, which I have not seen. So I don't think, as I mentioned earlier, that solves the problem, and partly because the foreign companies are often very closely linked to the foreign governments.
Now, if say a foreign company or government decide, say an ambassador decide to stay at one of the Trump hotels, whether it's in Washington or wherever, he's promising to pay that to the Treasury. So how do we know that this is even occurring? How do we know that we're getting the fair market value that his attorney has said that the emolument clause does not prohibit?
We don't. We don't know that, and we don't know exactly what that amount is going to be set at. We don't know the role of the ethics advisor in terms of the transaction. It's usually not typical for third parties to intervene in transactions, so we don't know how the negotiations will occur. The old saying, the devil is in the details, is very much present here, and the absence of all of these details is what creates the problem.
I mean, is he saying that he's going to reveal his taxes so that we can get some of this information? Otherwise, we don't have any information at all. It's not like it's public. It's not like it's a Clinton Foundation, which was public and their private personal taxes were available too. We don't have that availability. So I'm just
Yeah,
wondering, how do we find out?
that's the exact issue that I think in some ways is sort of behind this issue, which is, during the campaign he stridently, or at least gave the impression that he was resistant and would not, and has apparently concluded he will not release his taxes. And without that information, we're in the dark. And we have to almost take some of the things that come out of his administration at face value, and that's simply not enough accountability in a democracy where you should have more transparency in which people can then make judgments based on open records regarding whether or not someone like the president-elect is acting in an appropriate way. So I think that's a huge failure on his part in terms of easing the concerns of many.
Now, I think that some people, professors, and I believe you also wrote, am I correct to say that he's going to have a conflict day one?
I think so. I don't see how in the next week, which is, pretty much, we don't have much more time than that, the kind of cutting off of connections between himself and his business that are necessary are going to occur. I mean, even if he accomplishes what he said he wants to, such as having his kids run the business, I still don't think that's enough. And so on day one, he has to swear an oath of office to the presidency and to uphold the Constitution. And my argument is that on day one, he may be in violation of that oath, because if he's not if he hasn't resolved the emoluments clause problem, then from day one we start off with a constitutional problem.
Okay, I have a question here from Dan Henderson on Facebook, and it says, is it the case that once a foreign government pays, the violation occurs, which is done with money thereafter shows not alter that conclusion? The money, Oh, okay. What is done thereafter with the money does not alter the conclusion. So the donation that he's making to the Treasury is does not mitigate the fact that he collected the money.
That's correct. I mean, the whole problem is
It's more
it's
of a
that
PR.
payment.
It's more of a PR stunt.
Yes, it's a PR stunt, and it's that payment that itself is the violation. That's right.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. If anybody else have any questions, please go ahead and ask away. We have about what 15 minutes more or 10 minutes? Tell me how much time you have, Doctor.
Yeah, 15 minutes, 10 minutes is fine, whatever you like.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so let's look at it from the other side, if you don't mind. Uh, so the argument is that, and I'm going to try to make the argument, even though I don't believe it. Okay, but for argument's sake, uh, look, the public knew that I was running for president. They knew that I was a business person. They knew that I had, and you've heard this, that I've had holdings all over the world, that my company is worth over $10 billion in climbing. And they never, they voted for me because they just knew that I was going to be able to handle my business and I in government. And in fact, I'm going well beyond their expectations because what I'm doing is, I'm just giving up my ownership. I mean, my control and management control over the business. So America really knows what is already going on. And they voted for me.
I think, sure, he won the Electoral College. That's true, but that doesn't mean once he wins the Electoral College, he can't commit constitutional violations, that somehow he is immunized from, therefore, doing anything wrong because the Electoral College came out in his favor. That means he can do whatever he wants. That's really, I think, one of the concerns people have when he makes statements like, I'm above this law, I'm not bound by this law. There's this sense that because he won the Electoral College and is going to be the president-elect, that he, is sort of free to do certain things. And, the problem with that reasoning is, we like to think of our country as being a country where no one is above the law. And in terms of what he's done, it is not accurate to say that he has done more than what is necessary, because if he wanted to do more, or not more, but if he wanted to really remove the conflict, there is no reason why the blind trust could not be truly blind, with independent financial people being the ones making the decisions, with the family being essentially cut off from it. And then at the same time, he doesn't lose his business. So, it's got a fairness aspect to him in that, once he's done with the presidency, he, can go back to doing what he does. And let me just add one other concern. Just think about it. If you are a foreign government, you have a choice as to where to go stay, in a hotel, or where to work with a business. Even if President-elect Trump is not directly involved, you would be very tempted to do things that might later on be something he learns about that might, in fact, help him accrue more money during this period. Even by his doing what he's doing, he still may accrue more money precisely because these businesses are there and the conflict issues are not being resolved sufficiently well to give us confidence that there's not some personal profiteering that at some level is occurring.
Well, he has a track record, if I might. He has a track record, as we know, of promoting his golf course, promoting his hotel, promoting his other properties in different cities. I would think that would be prohibited.
It should be prohibited, and that's my point, though, is that to the extent that even if some promoting is prohibited, that there's just going to be a lot of people, and maybe some foreign governments and maybe some foreign entities, who say, well, I don't need the advertising. I know these companies or these golf courses or these resorts exist, and I'm going to take advantage of that by having our folks stay there or use those resources, because that might help me later. And, again, it would be much more secure if we knew that, the individuals who were running this new business or business were not family members, and we're not asking him to eliminate the businesses. And if he, accrues profit because of the independent people who run a truly blind trust, we're even saying that's acceptable. But the whole thing basically smells. And, we want him to be the president of the whole United States, think about what is best for the nation, and not have family members close by. Just the other day, as you know, his son-in-law apparently was talking a deal with, I believe, a Chinese company, who is now the son-in-law who apparently will be, down the hall from him in the White House. It's a terrible thing.
So if you're a business that's competing against Trump in any way, it would seem to me that you would have an argument that unfair business practice. I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah, I don't know if it would meet the legal standard, but I think morally and ethically, there is a problem there. Now, I want to be fair. We don't want to set up a system where business people can't run for office, and where, during the time, if they win and are in office, through a truly blind trust, it ends up being the case that, their business does well. But given his past and given his self-promotion tendencies and given the self-promotion tendencies of people within his administration, particularly his family, again, we get to the situation where we worry that they're going to cross the line here very easily, because, like I said, two relatives right down the hallway and two other sons running the business. I mean, how much closer can you be?
Right. And to my knowledge, there is no, say, firewall among the kids and the son-in-law. So any transfer information, could be very, very fluid, can be done passively, but still done. And somehow what you could have is you can have either one of those people, the daughter or the son-in-law, actually make recommendations based upon the information they have.
That's correct. And I don't know if you've ever been to a holiday party, but at holiday parties, people will often just sort of, or parties generally, people will sometimes just pass on information without thinking about it. And just imagine a family that's going to be, constantly together, presumably, in many social situations. Even if it's not done deliberately, one could easily imagine it occurring just sort of, hey, by the way, And again, that's why I think it's so important that the blind trust be really independent, that the ethics advisor choice be set up and the choice mechanism be set up in such a way that the choice being made is made by someone or some entity that is independent, and that, as you point out, this lack of a firewall, be sort of taken care of as well.
Now, also, let me just make this other argument that they're making, and that is that, and I think you even referred to it, and that is that you can't, you just don't want to penalize somebody who's been successful all of his or her life to not be able to, run for very high elective office. And so by forcing somebody to have a pure blind trust, you're going to prevent people from actually going ahead and being able to to be competitive in this very important realm of our existence, our American existence. I mean, isn't that a kind of a fair argument?
I think, first of all, it's not clear to me that there's a penalty here in the sense of the business is still going to be doing a lot of its business and potentially still certainly earning revenues. I can't predict, how the profits will come out, but the penalty part seems quite unclear to me that there will be a penalty. And secondly, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of public servants who decline jobs all of the time that would pay them more money in order to do public service. So, Eric Holder was Attorney General. He made a salary. If he were in private practice, and I think he's probably going into and has gone into or may go into private practice, he'd make much more than that. Federal judges throughout the country are paid, a very small amount compared to what they could make in private practice. It's certainly not insignificant. They're paid, enough money to sort of presumably live comfortable lives, but I would take issue that it's actually sometimes not a bad idea that for a person to show their dedication to the national interest, they may not be as easily able to make personal profits during that period because the national interest comes first, and this is how you show it.
Yeah, my personal opinion, let me just throw it out to you, my personal opinion is so what? I mean, you should not have run for president. I'm serious. I mean, like, and what other people have said is look, people give things up. I mean, they give up their risking their lives for the government. Okay. And, yeah, he could lose. I mean, if he put his property up for fire sale, for an example, and the argument is, well, he could lose $1 billion or $2 billion. So what? I mean, he made the decision. I mean, that's how firm I am about that. So what? We already know what happened with the Clinton Foundation, and that was not pretty. And she lost in great part, I think, because of they're basically not doing what they said they were going to do. So how in the world do we go from that to this? It's, to me, mind-boggling.
Yeah, and to add to your point, there is no reason that if you did a sale of assets, you couldn't arrange it to make sure it does not become a fire sale. Because I think the American people are fair and would understand that, there's some mechanism that would have to be established if that were the way this goes. But your underlying point about, he shouldn't have run in the first place and people make sacrifices. Just remember, during the campaign, we had that very eloquent gentleman who spoke at the Democratic Convention, whose son died fighting abroad, and he held up the U.S. Constitution and spoke very eloquently about the sacrifice his son had made. And then, within I think a day or two, President-elect Trump either tweeted or in some other way said, well, I've made sacrifices too. I don't think so, compared to what we're talking about in terms of what real patriots do. And so I'm not an advocate of saying to be a patriot you must sacrifice huge amounts, but I am an advocate of the idea that sometimes doing what's in the national interest means giving up some of what's in your personal interest.
One last question, and I know you got to go, and that is that I would make the argument. Let me just preface it by saying that I would make the argument that he's going to have a conflict even with his kids controlling the properties, and his going into blind trust, and his even maybe being divested or sold, because he's going to be making major decisions, local, domestic and foreign, that are going to directly impact his kids, benefit his kids, or hurt his kids. a good example of that, and I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday. We were talking about flood insurance, and the flood insurance law is going to uh, is going to sunset this year, and so we have to reaffirm the law. And so, I asked him, well, hey, what about the president? And he said, well, look, Trump has a lot of property on the waterfront. Wherever there's water. I mean, he's got a lot of property. Well, is the decision that he makes, whether it's his property on the waterfront or his kids' properties, okay, are those decisions that he's making going to, influence, impact, directly benefit, himself or his kids? And, personally, I think for it to be totally kosher, his kids should have divested. But that's my take. Anyway, your thoughts.
I agree with the divestment argument you just made, and I'd add, the president's going to have a huge influence on banking policy, banking legislation, tax legislation. We had a scandalous situation, that occurred on Wall Street several years ago. The president's going to have a lot of power about how issues involving those kinds of things are handled. And so one concern that's very serious is that even if you have a blind trust, when you have someone with so many fingers in so many places, that they might be tempted to make decisions based on either what's in their interest or what's in their son's interest. And we want to make sure they're making the decisions based on what's in the national interest as much as possible. So I think that's an inherent conflict. Now that one's a tough one to get rid of because every president has banking and taxes and those issues to worry about that might affect them. But in his case, we're talking about billions of dollars, so it's a different ballgame.
Yeah. Listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know you got to run, and I really appreciate your taking the time with us. And this is right now, again, on Facebook Live. We will edit and put it up on my website in different excerpts on BayouBuzz.com. Thank you again. I really do appreciate it. Please stay in touch.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.